Stormy Daniels can testify to a lot of what happened during that initial encounter that set the stage for the payments that would lead to this whole trial. She says at one point that she went to the bathroom and came out, and that Trump was in the bedroom waiting for her in his boxer shorts and a t-shirt, sort of between her and the door. She describes it as not him explicitly blocking the path to the door, but he was in the path to the door. She had been planning to leave at that point. And she was asked by the prosecutor, did you at some point end up on the bed having sex with him? She said yes. When she described the position they were in, the defense objected and the objection was sustained. And this is really the story of the rest of Stormy Daniels' testimony. She was describing, sometimes in more detail than most people wanted, what happened, and there were a lot of objections. That's not surprising. The fact that Donald Trump's legal team is going to object to a lot of this totally makes sense. He's boiling inside, so they have to, or they'll be fired on the spot. But what might be a little bit surprising is that the judge was almost entirely on board for these objections. And not just the objections, the judge had some objections of his own. He repeatedly admonished Stormy Daniels to slow down, to stay on subject, and to just answer the question. She's very media. She's done a lot of interviews and she's an entertainer. So she would tend to talk a lot and add a lot of detail that wasn't necessarily directly germane to the question. And he wasn't always playing ball with it. Now we still got a lot of details regardless. She described herself being traumatized by the encounter, wondering, quote, how I got to the place of having sex with him. She does point out, as she had in past interviews, that she didn't say no, quote, because I didn't say anything at all. That also came up again when she was asked about whether a condom had been used. She was asked by the prosecutor, did you say anything about that? No, the fact that there was no condom. And she says, no, again, I didn't say anything at all. I didn't say anything at all. And there's a little bit more. She says that she didn't object in the moment, but she didn't enjoy it. She felt that there was a power dynamic between the two, an imbalance in the power dynamic. And look, she feels that way. So did Trump. That's why this entire alleged thing was set up. He felt like, as he described with Billy Bush, he would be able to do pretty much whatever he wanted. She desperately, apparently needed his business help or something on getting on The Apprentice or working together. Although, interestingly, she points out in her testimony that he raised the possibility of her being on The Apprentice first, not her. Now, he has tried to pitch her, and others have in the right-wing media, as just being like a grifter. She's just trying to get something out of him. But she's saying that it was his idea, that he basically tried to dangle it in front of her for this. And one more thing before we discuss that I think could really get to the core issue of what were the payments made for? Was it so Melania wouldn't find out, or was it to affect the outcome of the election? And she says that when they met in person for the last time many years ago, okay, before today, they finally meet again. He said that he didn't say anything about her needing to keep it quiet. Okay, and that is interesting because if you're the jury and you buy that, then many years go by where he didn't seem to care whether it came out.
Right.
And then in 2016, he cared enough to pay her off. Now, Melania finding out's a disaster in 2008, 2009, 2010 and on. But it's only an electoral disaster in 2015 and 2016. And so again, I don't know if they're gonna buy this. I don't know if they're gonna find her to be trustworthy. But this isn't just salacious detail. It does actually bear on the prosecution's case. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, what are the possible explanations for that time gap between when he started doing this? You know what I mean? Like why, I mean, what you just brought up, what is the explanation for that if your defense is that, no, it was just because he's married. He was married the whole time. He was married and she was pregnant when all this first happened, but he didn't even attempt to silence her until he's running for the highest office in the land. I mean, I don't know. Again, I'm law dumb. I don't know what, as a lawyer, what you do in that scenario, how you could possibly try to spin that. But again, also on the objection thing, again, what do I know? But I heard a CNN legal expert saying earlier that they would presumably attempt to object as little as possible, because I guess generally that's seen as like they feel like the jury sees that as being overly defensive, or like sees that as like implying something when you object a lot. So it's like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Again, the lawyers are, I think, between like generally accepted legal theory and then Donald Trump sitting there, like you said, they could feel him wanting to fire them if they don't, stand up for him by objecting in the moment. Yeah. So, I don't know. I mean, the whole thing seems to be not going well for him as far as I can tell. But the whole time, since all his legal trouble started, I've been skeptical that anything would ever really happen to him, just because I'm a cynic in that way. And I've lived in this country my whole life, and I just feel like we don't do that sort of thing here. So it's like the further this goes on and the worse it seems to look for him, the more kind of intrigued I get by the whole thing. Like, is he really going to end up wriggling out of this, or something going to actually happen? It's getting wild, getting into the thick of it at this point.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I hadn't really thought about that. I'm quite law dumb as well, but what's interesting is that the lawyers, to the extent that he might have good lawyers, once again, finally, for a long time he didn't. Like, even if they think something is in his best interest legally, he's running the show. They don't get to decide the thing that's best for him necessarily. So you might be entirely right. Doing a bunch of the objections might look super defensive, but he's the one who's threatening to fire them or whatever. So we will definitely see. I'm gonna throw out two other details before we move on to other stuff. One, Eric was back in court sitting directly behind Donald Trump. I don't know if I had to guess, I'm not a psychic or whatever, but if I had to guess, I doubt he cares about, I think he knows who his father is. I think that he's known who his father is for a very long time. Hearing all of these details, I mean, I think he's in for a penny, in for a pound. But there was also reference to calling Stormy Daniels at one point back then, not now, honey bunch. And I don't know why, but that just, I don't like anything about this story, but I don't like that either. And I do wonder, obviously the jury's watching this, the nation is watching this. There's also one individual sitting at Mar-a-Lago watching this. And I just wonder what they're thinking. Thanks for watching our video. Did you know that you can support our show by becoming a subscriber? Just click the subscribe button and also ring the bell so that you get notifications when we're live or when we post new content.